He told her she was broken, told her in front of his attorneys, his lieutenants, his most trusted men, that a woman who could not carry his bloodline had no place beside him. No apology, no hesitation, just a verdict, delivered like a business decision, while she sat across the table from him and kept her hands perfectly still in her lap so nobody in that room would see them shaking. That was 7 months ago. Tonight, Zuri Ellington walks back through those same doors. She is not begging. She is not explaining herself. She is carrying divorce papers in one hand and 7 months of silence in the other, and beneath the long black coat buttoned tight against the Seattle rain, she is carrying something else entirely. Something that is going to stop Seo Do-yun cold the moment he sees it. Something he told her she could never give him. If you have ever been told you were not enough by the one person who was supposed to protect you, stay with us. Because this story is going to show you exactly what it looks like when a woman walks back into the fire not to beg for warmth, but to burn the whole thing down on her own terms. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens in that conference room tonight is only the beginning, and you do not want to miss a single moment of what comes after. Hit the like button and drop a comment telling us what city and country you are watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Now, let us go back to the beginning. The night Zuri Ellington first understood that she had married a man who believed she belonged to him the way a building belongs to its owner. It was not during one of the loud moments. It was not during one of the arguments that ended with doors slamming hard enough to rattle the frames, or during the evenings when Do-yun sat at the head of his dinner table, surrounded by men who deferred to every syllable he produced, and she sat at the other end feeling like furniture that had been arranged to complete the aesthetic. No. The moment she understood it was a quiet Tuesday morning, 18 months into their marriage, when she reached for her own phone on the kitchen counter, and he looked up from his coffee and said, without raising his voice, without any edge in his tone at all, "You were going to call someone?" Not a question, not exactly. Zuri had lowered her hand. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself that men like Seo Do-yun were simply careful, that he had spent 15 years building the Baekjin Syndicate from a regional operation into one of the most feared criminal organizations on the West Coast, and that kind of survival instinct did not shut itself off when he walked through the front door of their home. She told herself that he loved her, which was true, in whatever way a man like that understood love, which was the way a vault understands the thing locked inside it. She told herself a lot of things in those first 2 years. She stopped telling herself those things on the night he had told her she had failed him. It had not been preceded by a fight. That was the part that stayed with her. Even now, even 7 months later, as she stood in the back of the black car that moved through Seattle's rain-slicked streets toward the Baekjin headquarters. There had been no buildup, no argument that escalated into something irretrievable. Simply Basin sitting in the study, Do-yun behind his desk, reviewing something on his laptop, Zuri on the settee near the window, with a book she had not been reading when he closed the laptop, looked at her, and said, "The doctors confirmed it today. You cannot give me a child." Zuri had set the book down. She remembered the specific weight of the silence in that room. "That is not exactly what they said," she answered carefully. "They said it would be difficult, that the chances were lower than—" "I heard what they said." "Then you heard them say difficult, not impossible." Do-yun had looked at her the way he looked at a contract clause that no longer served his interests. Considered, measured, discarded. "A man in my position cannot build a future on difficult," he said. "The Baekjin name requires continuation, succession. An heir who carries legitimate blood and can eventually—" "I am sitting right here." Her voice had come out quieter than she intended, but steadier than she felt. "I am your wife. I am sitting 4 feet away from you, and you are talking about me like I am a problem you need to solve. I am telling you the reality of our situation. You are telling me I am not enough." He had not denied it. That was the thing. He had simply looked at her with that flat, measuring expression and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. And in that silence, Zuri had understood something with a clarity that felt almost physical, like a bone snapping cleanly, that this man had decided she was a liability. That somewhere in the architecture of his ambitions, she had been quietly reclassified. Not a wife, not a partner, a failed investment. She had stood up. She had walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. And then she had begun very carefully and very quietly to plan. She did not leave that night. She did not leave that week. Zuri Ellington had learned patience the way people learn languages in adulthood, through necessity, through repetition, through the slow accumulation of small corrections until something that once felt foreign becomes second nature. She spent 3 more weeks inside that house, She watched Do-yun move through his days with the settled confidence of a man who had already made his decision and was simply waiting for the administrative details to resolve themselves. He was not cruel in those weeks. He was something worse. He was indifferent. He moved around her like she was already gone, and she used that indifference as cover. She made calls from borrowed phones. She met with an attorney, not one connected to any of the law firms the Baekjin syndicate retained, but a woman in Bellevue who handled domestic cases and had a reputation for discretion in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, while Do-yun believed she was at a spa appointment. She began moving small amounts of money into an account he did not know existed. She started photographing things. Not the dramatic evidence of violence or illegal activity, she was smarter than that, and more careful but the quieter documentation. Text messages in which he had explicitly told her she could not see certain friends. A voicemail in which his tone left no room for interpretation. Dates, times, the specific language he used when he reminded her, very calmly, that her comfort depended entirely on his goodwill. Then, on a morning when the Seattle rain was coming down hard enough to turn the city into a gray blur, Zuri packed a single bag. She did not take anything sentimental. She did not take the jewelry he had given her, which was significant and beautiful and felt now like it had always been a collar made of precious metals. She took her documents, her laptop, her medication, and the specific folder she had assembled over 3 weeks of careful, sleepless work. She left while Do-yun was in a meeting. Nobody at the syndicate knew she was gone for almost 4 hours. By then, she was already somewhere they could not easily reach her. The 7 months that followed were not romantic. They were not the triumphant montage of self-discovery that the situation might seem to call for, if life operated the way stories sometimes pretend it does. Zuri was 30 years old, legally still the wife of one of the most dangerous men on the West Coast, living in a rented apartment in a city 3 hours from Seattle, trying to figure out how to exist in a world she had partially surrendered her independence to enter. She was also, approximately 6 weeks after she left, staring at 2 pink lines on a test she had taken 3 times because she did not trust the first result. She sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. She thought about every appointment she had attended, with doctors who spoke to her in careful, measured tones about reduced likelihood and challenges with conception language she had translated, in her own head, into a kind of verdict. Because Do-yun had already translated it that way, and she had let his interpretation become hers. She thought about the night in the study. She thought about the way he had looked at her. She thought about what it meant that the thing he had declared impossible was, in fact, growing inside her. Then she picked herself up, off the floor, washed her face, and called her attorney. They talked for 2 hours. By the end of that call, Zuri had made 2 decisions. The first was that she was keeping the baby. The second was that she was not telling Do-yun until she was ready. Until she had constructed, around herself and around this child, a structure of legal protection and financial independence, sturdy enough that nothing he could deploy attorneys, influence, money, the invisible pressure that his name exerted on anyone who did business in his world could dismantle it without costing him more than he was willing to pay. She spent the next 6 months building that structure. She found independent doctors who did not share her name with anyone. She worked with her attorney to document everything relevant to the marriage in preparation for a divorce filing. She established the financial accounts. She reached out to people from her life before Do-yun carefully, selectively, only the ones she genuinely trusted, and rebuilt a network that existed entirely outside his reach. She learned during those 6 months that she was considerably more capable than 2.5 years of being managed had allowed her to believe. She was 7 months along when she decided it was time. The Baekjin syndicate headquarters occupied the upper floors of a building in the Belltown neighborhood that presented itself, from the outside, as a legitimate import logistics company. The lobby was cold marble and low light. Do-yun's security team was thorough and unhurried in the way of men who had never needed to rush because nothing had ever caught them by surprise. Until tonight, Zuri arrived at 9 in the evening. She had not called ahead. She had simply appeared at the entrance in her long black coat, her hair pulled back from her face, and told the first guard she made eye contact with, "Tell him his wife is here." The guard had recognized her immediately. She watched the recognition move across his face, the slight recalibration, the uncertainty about what category she currently occupied in the hierarchy of people who could and could not walk through that door. She had been Do-yun's wife. She had also, from the syndicate's perspective, vanished without explanation 7 months ago. Neither of those facts gave the guard a clean protocol to follow. He made a call. Zuri stood in the lobby and waited. Her back was straight. Both hands were still. She had practiced this moment in the bathroom mirror of her apartment that morning, not because she was performing anything, but because her body had a tendency toward visible anxiety, and she needed it tonight to do something different. The guard came back, gave her a short nod, led her to the elevator. The conference room on the 14th floor was the same room in which Do-yun conducted every meeting of consequence. Heavy table, high-backed chairs, the kind of room designed to make the person on the wrong side of it feel small. Zuri had sat in it, over the years, on several occasions, usually as an afterthought, present, because Do-yun occasionally liked to demonstrate that he had a wife, the way he might demonstrate that he had a particularly fine watch. She pushed open the door. Do-yun was already there, seated at the head of the table with 2 of his senior attorneys and 3 of his lieutenants flanking him on either side. He had known she was coming. He'd had long enough to arrange himself, which meant he was already positioned, already composed, already behind whatever expression he had selected for this encounter. He looked at her and said nothing. Zuri walked to the table, reached into the interior pocket of her coat, and set the divorce papers down in front of him. The room was completely silent. Do-yun looked at the papers. Then he looked at her. "You came back," he said. His voice was the same. 7 months had not changed the specific quality of it. The controlled evenness that had taken her years to understand was not calm, but something that only resembled calm, the way a held breath resembles peace. Zuri pulled out the chair across from him and did not sit in it. "No," she said, "I came to leave." One of the attorneys shifted in his seat. A lieutenant near the window stopped looking at his phone. Do-yun's expression did not change, but something moved behind his eyes, not surprise exactly, but adjustment. The recognition that whatever script he had prepared for this conversation, she was not following it. 7 months, he said, and you come back with this. I come back with the end of something that should have ended the night you decided I was disposable. I never said I failed you. She kept her voice level. Not cold, not heated, just factual, the way you state a thing that is simply true. In front of your men, in your own study, you sat across from me and told me I had failed you because the doctor said pregnancy would be difficult. Not impossible, difficult. And you decided that a wife who could not guarantee you a bloodline on demand was a liability. The room had gone very still. Do-yun looked at her with the flat measuring expression she had once found so difficult to read. She knew it now. She had spent 2.5 years learning its grammar. And yet, he said quietly, "Here you are, here I am," Zuri agreed. To sign papers and walk out that door for the last time. Do-yun leaned back in his chair. The attorneys exchanged a look they believed was subtle. It was not. Zuri had spent years in rooms like this, with men like this, and she had learned to read the peripheral transactions, the glances, the fractional shifts in posture, the way power moves through a room without being named. "You seem very certain," Do-yun said, "for a woman who is standing in my building." "I'm certain because I came prepared," she said, "and because the fact that it's your building stopped being relevant to me a long time ago." He studied her then. Really studied her, not the quick assessment of a man who has already made up his attention, but the slower, more dangerous attention of one who has noticed something he cannot immediately categorize. His gaze moved across her face, down to the coat she was still wearing, despite the warmth of the room, back to her face again. "You're hiding something," he said. Zuri did not flinch. She did not confirm or deny. She picked up a pen from the table and slid the divorce papers slightly closer to his side. "Sign," she said, "and we're done." Do-yun did not reach for the pen. He leaned forward instead, both forearms on the table, and looked at her with the specific attention he reserved for things he had not yet solved. "You disappeared for 7 months," he said. "No contact. No message. You didn't take money from our accounts, I checked. You didn't reach out to anyone connected to the syndicate. You simply vanished. And then you reappear tonight, in person, alone, in this building, and tell me you came to leave." A pause. "That is not the behavior of a woman who is simply asking for a divorce." "No," Zuri said. "It's the behavior of a woman who is done asking for things." He watched her hand move, just briefly, just for a moment. The way a person's hand moves toward something reflexive, something they are protecting without quite meaning to make the gesture visible. Her palm flattened for just a second against the left side of her coat, low on her abdomen. She pulled it back immediately, but he had seen it. Seo Do-yun went very quiet, not the controlled quiet of a man managing his reactions. The sudden, airless quiet of a man whose entire framework for a situation has just cracked directly down the center. He looked at her coat. He looked at the way it was buttoned all the way to the collar. He looked at the way she was standing, the specific angle of it, the slight shift in her weight distribution, The almost imperceptible way her body was oriented away from the edge of the table, as if making space for something. "Zuri," he said, and something in the way he said it, without the flatness, without the control, was different from anything she had heard from him in a very long time. She met his eyes, and in that moment, in that room full of his lawyers and his men and the paperwork designed to sever the last legal bond between them, Seo Do-yun began to understand that the woman standing across from him was not simply his estranged wife returning to close a chapter. She was carrying something beneath that coat, and the room, all of it, every person in it, every assumption that had been made about how this evening would go, was about to change. Do-yun did not move. That was the thing Zuri noticed first, the absolute stillness of him, which was different from his usual controlled stillness, the way a held grenade is different from a paperweight. He had gone the kind of quiet that happens when a person's mind is working faster than their body can keep up with, when the ground beneath every assumption they made has shifted, and they have not yet figured out where the new footing is. His eyes had not left her coat. One of the attorneys, the younger one, Park something, she had met him twice at syndicate functions, and he had spoken to her the way people speak to decorative objects, cleared his throat. It was a small sound. In the silence of that room, it landed like something dropped on a hard floor. Do-yun's gaze moved to him, just a look. The attorney went still. "Leave," Do-yun said. Nobody moved immediately, which was itself a measure of how disoriented the room had become. These men had spent years learning to read Seo Do-yun, learning the difference between the commands that allowed a half-second of organized withdrawal and the ones that did not. This one apparently landed somewhere unfamiliar, because for 3 full seconds, the only sound was the rain against the windows 14 floors down and the faint ambient hum of the building's climate system. Then the younger attorney pushed back his chair. The others followed. The lieutenants last, they moved with the particular reluctance of men trained to be present for exactly this kind of moment. Men for whom leaving felt like an abdication. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Choi, whose actual name Zuri had never been given, because in 2.5 years of marriage, she had been introduced to exactly none of Do-yun's senior people by their real names, paused at the door and looked back at his boss. Do-yun did not look at him. Choi left. The door closed. The room was suddenly very large and very quiet, and it contained only the two of them and the divorce papers on the table between them and whatever was underneath Zuri's coat, which Do-yun had not yet asked about directly because he was, she understood, a man who did not ask questions he was not prepared to manage the answers to. He was preparing now. She could see it the specific way his jaw had tightened, the careful breath he drew and released through his nose, the way his hands were flat on the table surface in front of him rather than folded, which meant he was grounding himself in something physical because whatever was happening in his head needed anchoring. "Take off the coat," he said. Zuri did not move. "I'm not cold," she said. "That wasn't." Reset Zuri. Do-yun. His eyes came up to hers, and they stayed there. And for a moment the room held something that was not quite the dynamic of the last 7 months, and not quite the dynamic of the marriage before that, but something that existed in the sliver between them two people who had known each other well enough to hurt each other, precisely, now standing on opposite sides of something neither of them had fully named yet. "How long?" he said. "How long what?" "Don't." She looked at him. He looked at her. The rain against the windows was steady and indifferent. 7 months, she said. The number landed visibly. She watched it happen, the fractional tightening around his eyes, the way his shoulders shifted almost imperceptibly, the sharp and quickly controlled exhale. He was doing math. She could practically see him doing it, counting backwards, placing the timeline against the architecture of their marriage, against the specific terrible evening in the study and the weeks before it. "Before you left," he said. "Yes, you knew no." She said it cleanly, without defensiveness. "I didn't know when I left. I found out 6 weeks later." Something moved across his face that she could not immediately categorize. It was not one of his standard expressions. It was rawer than that, less managed, and it was gone in under a second, but she had seen it. 2.5 years of watching this man navigate rooms full of dangerous people without revealing anything he did not intend to reveal. She had become fluent in the brief involuntary moments, the ones that happened in the fraction of time, before his control caught up. He stood up. She did not step back. She had decided in the apartment that morning, while she was doing her hair and telling herself she was ready, that she would not step back from him tonight. Not once, not for any reason. It was the kind of decision that sounds simple and isn't. Do-yun walked around the end of the table. He stopped approximately 4 feet from her, close enough that she could see the specific line of tension across his shoulders, could read the careful way he was breathing, could smell the faint trace of whatever he drank in the evenings. Kept her eyes level. "You kept this from me for 7 months," he said. My child," Zuri said, "who also happens to be yours biologically. Those are two separate things, that is." He stopped himself again. She had noticed this about him tonight, this new pattern of starting sentences and interrupting himself, which was not something the Seo Do-yun she had married did. He finished sentences. He completed thoughts. He spoke with the deliberateness of a man for whom words were instruments used to produce specific effects. This stopping and starting was something different. "You had no right to disappear with." "I had every right," she said. "You told me I had failed you. In your study, with the lamp on, in the middle of the evening, you looked at me across 4 feet of space and told me I had failed you because my body did not perform according to your requirements. So I left. My right started the moment you decided I was a failed asset." "That is not what I said. That is exactly what you said." "I said the situation was, you said you couldn't build a future on difficult." Her voice was still level. She was working to keep it that way, not because she felt level. She did not. She had not felt level in 7 months. She had felt approximately 1,000 other things instead, but because leveling her voice was a decision she had made, and she was keeping it. "I was sitting 4 feet away from you, and you were talking about me, like I was a variance in a projection. Not a person, a variable." Do-yun looked at her for a long moment. "And the answer to that," he said quietly, "was to disappear for 7 months carrying my child without telling me. The answer to that was to survive." The word sat between them. Survive, not flourish, not triumph. Survive, the specific, unglamorous word for what you do when the alternative is worse. When you pick yourself up from the bathroom floor of a rented apartment and decide that the only thing you can control is what happens next. Do-yun's expression shifted. Not softened. He was not a man who softened. That was not a mode available to him, but changed. Like a frequency adjustment. "You weren't in danger," he said, and his voice had a different quality, something slightly defensive beneath the control. "Whatever you believed about, I was disappearing," Zuri said. "Not from physical danger, from myself. Every week I was less of a person and more of an arrangement. A wife-shaped thing you kept in the house to complete the picture." She paused. "I needed to find out if I still existed without you defining what I was." "And do you?" he asked. She looked at him steadily. "More than I ever did inside this marriage," she said. He took a breath. She watched his chest rise and fall. He turned away from her and walked to the window, and she let him, because she understood the mechanics of this, that there are moments when a man like Do-yun needs 3 seconds of not being looked at in order to reassemble himself. And denying him those 3 seconds would only make him harder to deal with when he turned back around. He turned back around in 4. "I want to see," he said. Zuri looked at him. "The coat," he said. "I want to see." She considered this. She had prepared for many versions of this conversation. She had run through them in her head during the long evenings in the apartment, during the prenatal appointments, during the early morning hours when the baby moved, and she lay awake in the dark, thinking about what came next. She had prepared for rage. She had prepared for manipulation. She had prepared for the cold legal approach, the syndicate's attorneys materializing like a weather system, organized and impersonal. She had not quite prepared for this, for the specific quality of his voice. When he said, "I want to see," which was not a command and was not a request, and was something in between that had no clean category. She reached up and began unbuttoning the coat. Her fingers moved from the collar down. 1 button. 2. The room was very quiet. Do-yun did not move. She watched him, watching her hands, and she thought about all the things this man was, had done the empire built on fear and precision, and the absolute willingness to make examples of people who crossed him. And she thought about what it cost him to stand in this room right now, looking the way he was looking. She let the coat fall open. 7 months. The full unmistakable reality of it, the roundness, the way her body had redistributed itself around this new gravity. The evidence of a life that was not hypothetical or speculative, or a subject for medical consultations phrased in probability language, but simply concretely, undeniably real. Do-yun stared. He was not a man who stared. He was a man whose attention was always calibrated, always intentional. But he stared now at the proof of the thing he had dismissed as impossible, the thing he had used to reduce her to a verdict. His face did something complicated that he did not fully manage to control. The doctor said he started. The doctor said difficult, Zuri said. You translated it into verdict. He was quiet. She moves at night, Zuri said, and she had not planned to say that. It was not strategic. It was just true, and it came out before she could route it through the part of her brain managing tonight's conversation for outcomes. She kicks. She has a pattern quiet in the mornings, active around 10 at night. The doctor says she's healthy. Do-yun looked up from her abdomen to her face. He said. Something happened in his expression that she would not describe later, even to herself, as emotion, because the word felt insufficient and also dangerously close to territory she was not ready to navigate. It was more like a crack in a structure, not collapse, just the first visible sign of what is happening inside the walls. Then he straightened. And the crack was gone, sealed over, and he was Seo Do-yun again, the mafia boss, the man who had built an empire by never being the one caught vulnerable in a room. The divorce, he said, is not happening. Zuri buttoned the top 2 buttons of her coat. The divorce, she said, is already happening. Those papers on the table are a courtesy. My attorney filed the initial petition 10 days ago. The air in the room changed. She had timed the filing deliberately. 10 days ago, far enough back that the legal machinery was already in motion, not something he could simply apply pressure to and stop before it started, but recent enough that he would not have known about it yet, would not have had time to mobilize whatever response he would eventually mobilize. She had learned during 7 months of building her exit that the timing of information was its own form of strategy. Without, I don't need your permission. Zuri, his voice had an edge now, the first real edge of the evening, not rage, but the precursor to it, the moment before a controlled burn stops being controlled. You are carrying my child. You disappeared for 7 months. You filed without any notice. Without what? She asked. Without asking? I stopped asking you things the night you told me I'd failed you. That was the last time I needed your approval to make a decision about my own life. This is not only about your life anymore. No, she agreed. It's about mine and hers. That's exactly why I did it this way. He looked at her for a long time. Kind of long that has weight to it, has specific intentions moving through it, though she could not always read them anymore. She had known this man's silences the way you know, the silences of someone you share walls with for years. But 7 months of distance had shifted the calibration. He walked back to the table, stood behind his chair with both hands gripping the top of it. She could see the tendons in his forearms from where she stood. You planned this, he said. Yes, the timing. Coming here in person instead of letting the attorneys. Why? He was not asking because he did not know. He was asking because he needed to hear her say it, needed to understand the specific shape of what she had done, the full architecture of it. Because you needed to see me standing in this room, she said. Not through a letter, not through an intermediary. You needed to be in the same space as the reality of what you did, so that we could both be clear that I am not afraid of you. I was never the problem you told yourself I was. And whatever comes next legally, with the child, with whatever your attorneys are going to attempt, I am not approaching it from a position of fear. Do-yun released the back of the chair. He walked toward her again. And this time he got closer, not aggressive, not quite, but inside the radius that in any other conversation would constitute a power move, physical translation of I am larger and better resourced, and this room is mine. She held her ground. You think this is over, he said quietly. I think that part of it is, she said, the part where you get to define what I am. I have attorneys, Zuri. I know what you have. She reached into her coat's inner pocket and withdrew a second envelope thinner than the divorce papers, sealed. She set it on the table beside them. That's a summary of the materials my attorney is holding. Documentation of the marriage, conversations, dates, patterns. Not criminal evidence against the syndicate. She said it before he could react. Watching his expression, I was never interested in burning the organization. This is about the marriage, but it is thorough. And if anything happens to me, if I become unreachable in any way, if anyone connected to this organization attempts to interfere with my ability to live my life and raise my daughter, it becomes relevant in ways that will be expensive and visible and inconvenient. The room was absolutely silent. Do-yun looked at the envelope. He looked at her. She watched something move through his expression, not fear, because she did not believe fear was something this man experienced in the simple way ordinary people did, but something adjacent. Something that resembled the sensation of realizing the floor plan of a building you thought you knew by heart is not the floor plan you are standing in. You built a case, he said. I protected myself, she said. The way I should have done years ago. He picked up the envelope, did not open it, turned it over once in his hands. This is a threat, he said. It's an explanation, she said. There's a difference. Not in my world. I know. That's why I made sure it was organized the way it is. Because in your world, the thing that changes behavior is cost. So I made sure the cost of certain behaviors was legible. He set the envelope back down. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before and could not entirely name it lived, somewhere in the territory between fury and something else. Something with more depth than fury, something that required more honesty than he was accustomed to, allowing himself in a room with another person. "I never wanted you to be afraid of me," he said. Zuri looked at him. "I know," she said, and she meant it, which was the complicated part, which was the part that had kept her awake in the early months of the marriage, trying to reconcile the man who could make her feel protected, and the man who made every decision about her life without consulting her. He had not wanted her to be afraid of him. He had simply arranged things in a way that made fear a reasonable response, and then been baffled when she experienced it. That was its own kind of damage, perhaps the most durable kind. That doesn't change what happened. He turned away again. This time he went to the window and stayed there, looking out at the city 14 floors below, at the rain moving through the streetlights in diagonal gray sheets. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were set with the particular rigidity of a man who is holding a number of things inside his body that have nowhere to go. Zuri watched him. She thought about the first time she had seen him, a function of some kind, a charity dinner she had attended with a friend, and Do-yun had walked into a room that was already full of significant people, and the room had reorganized itself around him without being asked to. She had thought, standing there with a glass of something sparkling she was not drinking, that he was the most precisely constructed person she had ever seen, like someone had built him specifically to occupy space with authority. She had been 30% right. The other 70% had taken her 2.5 years to understand. "I want to be part of her life," he said to the window. Zuri had expected this, had prepared for it. It did not make the hearing of it simple. "That's a conversation for attorneys," she said. He turned. "I don't want it to be a conversation for attorneys." "It already is." "That's not cruelty, Do-yun. That is the appropriate container for this. Given everything. Given what we are to each other right now, which is two people who are legally married for another few months, and functionally strangers, and have a child coming into the world between us. The attorneys are the structure that makes it possible for that to happen without either of us." She stopped, chose the word carefully, "without either of us doing something that cannot be undone." He was quiet, looking at her, the rain on the windows, papers on the table. "You planned everything," he said again, and this time it was not accusatory. It was something closer to recognition. "I had to," she said. "Who helped you? That's not information I'm giving you." "Could find out. You could try." She met his eyes. "And I'd ask you to consider what it would cost you to do that, relative to what it would get you." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. 4. Then something in him relented, not surrendered, not capitulated, but relented, which is a different thing. Which is what happens when a person decides that the position they are holding is not worth the damage of continuing to hold it. He reached out and picked up the pen from the table. Zuri went still. She watched him look at the divorce papers. She watched his hand with the pen move above the signature line. She watched him go completely motionless, the pen not quite touching the paper, and she understood that this was the moment, the specific hinge of the evening, the point that everything before it had been moving toward, and everything after it would move away from. His jaw tightened. He set the pen down. "I cannot sign this tonight," he said. The air shifted. Something inside Zuri's chest tightened, a specific and familiar frustration that lived just below the sternum. She had told herself she was prepared for this. She had told herself it was one of the likely outcomes, and that she had a response for it, a composed and prepared response that did not involve the particular strain of anger currently moving up through her ribcage. Do-yun, his voice was not loud, was very quiet, actually, quieter than most of the conversation had been, and somehow that was worse. He stopped. He did not finish the sentence, because finishing it would have required admitting to something he was not yet capable of admitting to in front of her. "I need time. You've had 7 months. I didn't know." He looked at her directly. "I didn't know about her. She doesn't change the marriage, Do-yun. The marriage is what it is. It was what it was before I was pregnant. She changes things for me. That is not my responsibility to manage." The edge came back into his voice, faint but present. "She is my daughter. She is my daughter," Zuri said. "Who is also your daughter, biologically. But you do not get to use her as a reason to slow this process down because you need time to adjust. I have been adjusting for 7 months. Alone. I have been to every appointment alone. I have made every decision alone. I have been afraid, and I have been tired, and I have been completely on my own, and I did all of it without asking you for anything. So I need you to understand that what I am doing tonight, coming here, putting those papers on this table, is not the beginning of a conversation. It is the delivery of an outcome. The silence after that was different from the silences before it. Heavier. Do-yun looked at the papers. He looked at her face. He looked at the curve under her coat. Then he did something she had not seen him do in the entire 2.5 years of their marriage, in any meeting, in any confrontation, in any moment when someone had said something to him that he could not simply dismiss or overpower. He sat down, not in the power position at the head of the table. He pulled out the chair beside him, the ordinary chair, the chair without significance, and he sat in it like a person rather than a structure, and he put his elbows on the table and pressed the heels of both hands against his eyes for a moment. Zuri watched. She did not say anything. He dropped his hands, looked at the table surface, then at her, standing across from him, still in her coat, still holding her ground, still every inch the woman he had. She could see him arriving at this understanding in real time, watching it happen across his face. The woman he had catastrophically misjudged the night. He decided she was a failed variable in his life's equation. "Tell me what you want," he said, the signed papers. Beyond that, she looked at him carefully. "A legal custody arrangement negotiated through proper channels," she said. "Boundaries respected. My life, our daughter's life, fully outside the orbit of the Baekjin syndicate. No surveillance, no leverage, no syndicate business touching her, ever in any form." He was quiet for a moment, and between us, he said, "You and me, there is no us," Zuri said. "That's what the papers say." "I know what the papers say." His voice was rough in a way she had not heard before, raw in a way she did not have a prior reference for. "I am asking what you want." She held his gaze. "I want," she said slowly, "to raise my daughter without looking over my shoulder. I want her to have a father who knows her without owning her. And I want to live the rest of my life as a person, not as someone's failed acquisition." Something moved through his face at the word acquisition, a visible flinch, brief and quickly suppressed, but real. "I will not sign tonight," he said again. Quieter now, almost careful. "But I am not," he paused. "I am not going to fight you the way you think I will." Zuri studied him. She had prepared for rage. She had prepared for manipulation. She had prepared for the syndicate's legal machinery mobilizing against her within 24 hours of this conversation. She had not quite prepared for this, for the man sitting across from her, looking like something inside him, had been quietly taken apart, and he was not yet sure what it had been holding in place. She was not soft enough tonight to let that change her position, but she filed it. She picked up the pen he had set down and slid the papers back in front of him. "I'll give you 72 hours, she said. "After that, the process continues without your signature, which takes longer and costs more, and ends in exactly the same place." He looked at the papers. Then he looked at her. "And tonight," he said. "Safe," she said. "I'm leaving this building tonight and I am safe." That is not a question. His jaw tightened again. A muscle flickered below his left eye. "Nobody is going to stop you," he said. She picked up the envelope, her copy of the divorce papers, and tucked it back inside her coat. She did not move toward the door immediately. She stood there for one more moment, looking at him sitting in the ordinary chair beside the large table, and she thought about all the miles she had traveled since the night she left this world behind. All the fear, and all the work, and all the mornings she had woken up in the apartment and put her hand on her stomach and told herself she was enough, that the two of them were enough, that whatever came next they would be enough together. Then she walked toward the door. She had her hand on the handle when he spoke. "Zuri," she stopped, did not turn around. "For what it's worth," Do-yun said. His voice was quiet, flat, the way someone's voice gets when they are saying a true thing they have no idea how to frame. "I was wrong about that night, about what I said." She stood very still with her hand on the door handle. The rain against the windows, the hum of the building around them. "I know," she said, and she pulled open the door and walked through it, past the guards in the hallway who moved aside without being asked, to the elevator that took her down 14 floors to the cold marble lobby, and then out through the glass doors into the Seattle rain, which hit her face like an exhale, like something the night had been holding, and finally let go. Upstairs in the conference room, Seo Do-yun sat alone at the table beside the unsigned divorce papers and the sealed envelope and the pen she had slid back in front of him, and he looked at his own hands for a long time, and the thing inside him that had cracked when she opened. That coat did not close back up the way he needed it to. It stayed open, and that, he understood with a cold and specific clarity, was the most dangerous thing that had happened to him in 15 years of building an empire on the premise that he could not be reached. She had reached him. Not tonight. Not in this conference room. But years ago, before he had dismantled her ability to trust him piece by piece without ever once intending to, and the damage of that was now sitting across the hall from everything he had built, and it had a heartbeat, and it was 7 months along, and it was going to come into the world regardless of what he did in this room tonight. Well, not regardless of what he signed or did not sign, regardless of every resource and strategy and instrument of pressure he had at his disposal. He reached out and picked up the pen. He looked at the signature line on the divorce papers. His hand did not move, and in that stillness, in the specific agony of a man who has spent 15 years being certain and has just encountered the one situation in which certainty is entirely beside the point, Seo Do-yun finally understood what it cost to be the kind of man he had become. The pen did not move that night. Zuri knew this, the way she knew most things about Seo Do-yun, not because he told her, but because she understood the mechanics of him well enough to predict the gap between what he felt and what he did about it, and the gap in this case was wide enough to park a truck in. He was not a man who made decisions from the place of raw feeling. He was a man who took raw feeling and ran it through 15 layers of calculation before allowing it to produce action. The signing would come, but it would come on his timeline, in his way after he had stress-tested every possible interpretation of his situation and determined that signing was the most strategically sound response available to him. She gave him his 72 hours. She spent them in the apartment, mostly awake, mostly in the chair by the window, with a cup of tea that went cold while she thought through contingencies. Her attorney, a woman named Donna Marsh, who had the specific energy of someone who had seen everything and was no longer impressed by any of it, called on the second morning to confirm that the filing was proceeding on schedule and that Do-yun's legal team had made 2 preliminary inquiries, polite, careful inquiries, kind that gather information rather than issue threats, which Donna had fielded with the particular brand of cheerful precision that made her extremely good at her job. "They're circling," Donna said, "not attacking yet." "They won't attack yet," Zuri said. "He told me he wasn't going to fight me the way I expected. People say things in conference rooms." Donna's voice was neutral, factual. "Let's see what they say in filings." Zuri agreed and drank her cold tea and watched the rain continue its apparently permanent occupation of the Seattle skyline. On the morning of the 73rd hour, her phone rang. It was not Do-yun. It was a number she did not recognize, a Seattle area code, a string of digits her phone had not stored. She almost did not answer. Then she did, because she had spent 7 months making herself answer the calls she did not want to take. The voice on the other end was male, measured, slightly accented in a way she could not immediately place. "Miss Ellington," the voice said, "my name is Attorney Kwon Ji-suk. I represent Seo Do-yun in personal matters distinct from the syndicate's general legal representation. He has asked me to arrange a follow-up meeting." Zuri stood up from the chair. "My attorney handles all communication," she said. "Yes, he anticipated you would say that. He asked me to tell you," a brief pause, "the kind that signals something being read from a note, that the meeting concerns something other than the divorce proceedings. Something you will want to hear directly." Zuri's hand tightened on the phone. "Something other than," she repeated. "Yes. Meaning he wants to discuss the child outside of the legal framework." "He did not specify," Kwon said, with the careful blandness of a man who has been told exactly what to say and nothing more. "He said only that it is time-sensitive and that it is important you hear it from him rather than through intermediaries." She should have said no. She knew, standing in her apartment with the rain against the windows and the baby doing the 10 o'clock at night kicks that had started on time even though it was 11 in the morning, that the correct answer was to refer this call to Donna and let the professional infrastructure she had spent 6 months building do the work it was built to do. She knew this. She was a woman who had spent 7 months learning to trust structure over impulse, who had rebuilt herself on the foundation of exactly this kind of discipline. "Where?" she said. The location was not the Baekjin headquarters. It was a restaurant in Capitol Hill, a small Korean place that had been open for 20 years and was operated, she would later understand, by a family with no connection to the syndicate, chosen precisely because of its neutrality. Do-yun was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner booth with no visible security, wearing a gray jacket she had not seen before, looking like an approximation of an ordinary person that was only slightly off, in the way a very expensive forgery is slightly off. He stood when she approached. She did not acknowledge this. She sat down across from him. "You have 30 minutes, she said. "I know," he sat. "Thank you for coming. What is it?" He looked at her for a moment, then he reached into the inside pocket of the jacket and placed a manila envelope on the table between them. Not large, letter size, the kind of envelope that contains documents. Zuri looked at it. She did not reach for it. "What is that?" she said. "Open it. Tell me what it is first." Do-yun put both hands flat on the table on either side of the envelope. He looked at her in the specific way that meant he was about to say something he had rehearsed and was not sure the rehearsal was adequate. 3 days ago, he said, I received information from someone inside my organization. Someone I have trusted for 6 years. He paused. The information concerns you. Specifically, it concerns the period after you left. Zuri went still. Not the stillness of composure, the other kind, the sudden cold stillness that happens when the body registers a threat before the conscious mind has fully assembled it. What kind of information, she said. Open the envelope, Zuri. She reached out and picked it up. Inside were 4 pages. The first was a photograph, a surveillance photo, low resolution but clear enough, showing Zuri outside a building she recognized, the medical office in Bellevue where she had been seeing her OB for the past 4 months. Standing beside her in the photograph was a man, tall in a dark coat. She recognized him too, Marcus Webb. Her chest tightened. Marcus was a man she had known for 3 years before the marriage, a friend. The word was complicated because it was technically accurate and also technically insufficient, but not in the direction anyone would assume, which was the point, or had been the point, until she was looking at this photograph and trying to understand why it existed, and who had taken it and what, specifically, it was doing inside a manila envelope that Seo Do-yun had just put on the table between them. She looked up. This is a photograph of me outside my doctor's office, she said. With Marcus Webb, Do-yun said. His voice was controlled. Entirely controlled, the absolute flatness of a man who is keeping something very compressed. Marcus is a friend. He drove me to an appointment because she stopped. The sentence had an end. The end was because I didn't want to go alone, and I didn't have many people I could ask, and Marcus was someone I trusted. She stopped because the act of explaining herself felt like the beginning of a losing position, and she was not going to enter a losing position without knowing the full shape of what she was up against. What is the specific claim being made, she said. Do-yun nodded toward the envelope. She turned to the second page. It was a document. Not official, not legal letterhead, not a formal record. It was typed, formatted to look like a report, the kind of thing produced by a person who wanted something to look credible without having to make it verifiably true. It claimed in flat and neutral language that Marcus Webb had been present at multiple medical appointments with Zuri Ellington during her pregnancy, that he had been observed at her apartment building on 4 separate occasions, that financial transfers had been made from an account connected to Webb into an account registered under a name Zuri did not recognize, which the report suggested was one of the financial mechanisms Zuri had used to secure her independent funds during the period after she left the marriage. She read it twice. The baby moved, a sharp, decisive kick just below her ribs that under any other circumstance she would have registered as reassuring. Right now she barely felt it. She set the page down. This is fabricated, she said. I know. She looked up. You know. I know, Do-yun said again. His expression was not the one she had expected. She had come into this restaurant, preparing herself for accusation, for the cold deployment of leverage for Do-yun, using this manufactured evidence as a reason to contest the paternity, to muddy the legal waters, to give his attorneys something to build a campaign around. Instead, he looked like a man who had swallowed something that had not agreed with him. I verified it. Before I called you, I spent 2 days running everything in that envelope, through sources I trust more than the man who gave it to me. Zuri was quiet. Then why? She said carefully. Are you showing it to me? Because the man who gave it to me, Do-yun said, is someone you know. The restaurant was not loud. It was the quiet kind of lunch service, the background noise of other people's conversations, providing a low hum that seemed, suddenly, very distant. Zuri's hands were flat on the table on either side of the envelope. She was aware of her own breathing, aware of the specific weight of whatever was about to be said. Who, she said. Do-yun looked at her steadily. Daniel Cho, he said. The name landed like something thrown from a height. Daniel Cho had been, for 3 years, Zuri's most reliable contact inside the syndicate's outer circle, not a criminal himself, not officially, but a man who operated in the administrative layer that surrounded organizations like the Baekjin, handling the kind of financial and logistical work that kept legitimate facades intact. He was the person who had connected her with the first attorney she had spoken to, the Bellevue attorney, 8 months ago, when she was still inside the marriage and beginning to understand that she needed to know what her options were. He had presented himself as someone sympathetic, someone who had watched Do-yun's marriage deteriorate and believed Zuri deserved better. He had, she now understood, been watching from much closer than she had realized. Daniel, she said. The word came out flat, hollowed out. He has been building a file on you for 4 months, Do-yun said, since approximately 2 months after you left. I don't know when he identified where you were, that's what I'm still trying to determine, but the surveillance began in early spring. The financial claims in that document are fabricated. The photographs are real, but the interpretation attached to them is not. He was constructing a narrative. For what purpose, Zuri said. Her voice sounded to her own ears like it was coming from somewhere slightly outside her body. To give me a reason to pursue full custody aggressively, Do-yun said. To make you look unstable. To make the child's paternity appear questionable, not in a way that would hold up in a DNA test, but in a way that would drag the proceedings out long enough to give the syndicate's attorneys time to build a containment structure around the situation. He paused. And to ensure that whatever outcome emerged from the custody process, it was one in which he had leverage. Leverage, Zuri repeated. Over me, Do-yun said. Not over you. You were the instrument. The target was me. She sat back in the booth. She was aware, with a kind of distant precision, that she needed to think clearly and that her body was currently doing several things that were incompatible with clear thinking. Her heart rate was elevated. Her hands were not entirely steady. And somewhere in the architecture of her chest, a controlled demolition was occurring, the slow structural collapse of the assumption that she had managed, through 6 months of careful and exhausting work, to build something impenetrable enough to stand in. Daniel Cho had been inside it the whole time. He knew about the envelope, she said. The one I brought to the meeting. He knew about your attorney. He knew about the legal filing. He knew where your primary medical provider was. He knew. Do-yun stopped. His jaw was tight. He knew more than he should have, Zuri. That is what I am telling you. Someone who you believed was helping you was feeding information in both directions and had his own agenda for how this situation resolved. Does he know about tonight? She said immediately. This meeting? No. Do-yun's voice was certain. The only people who know about this meeting are Kwon, who has been with me for 12 years and is the only person I told, and you. How can you be certain about Kwon? I can't be certain about anyone with absolute. He stopped. Reset. Kwon is as certain as I am capable of being certain about another person. Yet, Zuri looked at the envelope on the table. She looked at the photograph of herself outside the medical building with Marcus beside her. Marcus, who had driven her to that appointment because she had called him at 7 in the morning, unable to stop shaking, and told him she was scared, and he had said, I'm coming. The way people who actually care about you say I'm coming, without discussion, without conditions. Marcus, who had asked nothing from her, and who was now the central figure in a fabricated narrative designed to unravel everything she had built. What do you want? She said. I want you to know, Do-yun said. That is why I called you. Not as leverage, not as he searched for the word, not as a negotiating position. Because you built something to protect yourself, and someone put a hole in it without your knowledge, and you deserved to know. She looked at him. The look lasted longer than was comfortable. Why, she said, why do I deserve that from you? The question was not hostile. It was genuine, the flat, exhausted genuineness of a woman who has been careful and disciplined and strategic and has just discovered that someone she trusted was eating the structure from the inside while she was busy building the outside walls, and who needs right now to understand what is real and what is another layer of the same game. Do-yun looked at the table, then back at her. Because I spent 2.5 years making you feel like you didn't deserve things, he said. And I am trying, a pause, a fractional and quickly controlled tightening around his eyes. I am trying to do something different with the time I have left to do it differently. She did not respond to that. She picked up the envelope and tucked it into her bag. She needed to think. She needed Donna. She needed to get out of this restaurant and into a space where she could dismantle what she had just been told and examine each piece of it without Do-yun sitting 4 feet away from her, looking like a man trying very hard in real time to be better than he had been. Daniel, she said, what happens to him? Do-yun's expression shifted. She recognized this one. It was the expression the organization produced, the specific setting, that had nothing to do with the personal version of him. The operational calculation, the cost-benefit processing of a man who ran a criminal enterprise and had just discovered a betrayal inside it. That, he said carefully, is a syndicate matter. Came into my life, Zuri said. He put a camera outside my doctor's office while I was 7 months pregnant. Whatever happens to him in the syndicate is the syndicate's business. But I want to know if I am physically safe. Do-yun looked at her directly. Yes, he said. He is being handled. You are safe. She nodded once, started to rise. Zuri's voice stopped her. She stayed halfway between sitting and standing, one hand on the table edge. The envelope I gave you. The one you brought to the meeting at headquarters. Copies of your documentation. How many people had access to the information in it? The attorneys, the filings, your location. She understood what he was asking. She sat back down. She thought about the 6 months. She thought about every phone call she had made, every meeting she had attended, Every document she had shared with someone in the process of building her protection structure. She thought about Daniel Cho, specifically when she had spoken to him, what she had told him, how much of the framework she had described to a man she believed was an ally because he had given her the name of an attorney and expressed concern for her well-being in a convincing enough way that she had not thought to question it. The answer she was beginning to understand was too much. She had told him too much. Not everything, not the most critical pieces, the evidence documentation, the names of her primary attorneys, the specifics of the filing itself. Those had been kept tight, but enough. Enough that someone building a case against her would have had a useful foundation. She pressed her fingers against the table surface. "I need to call Donna," she said. "Yes," Do-yun said. "Right now, yes." She took out her phone. Her hands were steadier than she felt. She was making them steady through an act of will that was costing her something she could not currently calculate. She found Donna's number. The call went to voicemail. Zuri's stomach dropped. Donna Marsh answered every call. It was, in fact, something she had mentioned explicitly during their first meeting. "I keep this phone on, and I answer it, because the situations that require an attorney at 9 in the morning are the situations where you cannot afford to leave a voicemail." In 4 months of working together, Donna had answered every call within 2 rings. Zuri called again, voicemail. She lowered the phone. Do-yun was watching her face. "What?" he said. "My attorney isn't answering." Something moved through his expression, not alarm, because he was not a man who did alarm, but the rapid, cold recalibration of someone processing a new data point in real time. He pulled out his own phone and made a call she could not hear, turning slightly away from her, his voice dropping into Korean that she caught pieces of, but could not fully follow. He ended the call. He looked at her with an expression that told her, before he said a word, that the information he had just received was not good. "Donna Marsh," he said. "Describe her to me, my attorney." "Why?" "Describe her." "She's 50s. Black woman, runs a firm in Bellevue. She has been practicing domestic law for 25 years. She came recommended through." Zuri stopped. The sentence completed itself in her head without her saying it. "Came recommended through Daniel Cho, who had given her the name as part of his initial presentation of himself as someone helpful. Someone on her side, someone who wanted to see her protected." The world reorganized itself, not loudly, not with any of the dramatic markers that major realizations are supposed to arrive with. Just quietly, in the space of 2 seconds, the entire architecture of the thing she had believed standing on shifted underneath her and revealed its actual shape, which was not the fortress she had constructed in her mind, but something with a specific and critical flaw built into it from the beginning. She had trusted the source. She had verified Donna Marsh through independent research bar association records, case history, the kind of due diligence she had done carefully. Donna was real. Donna was a licensed attorney with a real practice and a real reputation. But the initial connection, the reason she had found Donna Marsh in the first place, the referral that had pointed her toward a specific name in a city full of attorneys, had come from Daniel Cho. And if Donna Marsh was connected to Daniel Cho in ways that went beyond a simple professional referral. "I don't know how deep it goes," Do-yun said, reading her face. His voice was low and even and held the specific quality of a man delivering difficult information in the most controlled way he is capable of. "My contact was not able to confirm whether Marsh is directly involved or simply the referral chain." "We need we," Zuri said. He stopped. "You said we," she said. He looked at her. "Yes. I am not a we with you," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was not shaking. It was the voice of a woman who has just had the floor pulled out from under her and is very carefully deciding where to put her feet next. "I am not," she stopped, breathed. "I cannot think about that right now. I need to think about what I have told Donna Marsh in 4 months of phone calls and meetings and consultations, and I need to figure out which parts of my case she has access to, and I need to get a new attorney by tomorrow morning. And I need to—" She stopped. Her hand had gone to her abdomen, not a deliberate gesture. The automatic one, the one her body made, whenever the calculation of what she was dealing with suddenly included the specific weight of the life she was responsible for protecting. Do-yun looked at her hand on her stomach. He looked at her face. "You are not alone in this," he said. "Not anymore." "I was alone in it," she said, "for 7 months, by choice and by necessity. I know that choice still stands. Zuri, my daughter, is not leverage," she said. "Whatever is happening with Daniel Cho, whatever he was trying to engineer, she is not a piece of it. She will not become a piece of it." "I know that," Do-yun said. His voice was firm, not commanding, different from that, more grounded. "That is not what he exhaled. I am not using any of this as a negotiating position. I called you tonight because you needed to know. Because you had a hole in your protection that someone put there deliberately, and you did not know it existed. You are since pregnant, and you have been handling everything alone. He stopped himself. The sentence was going somewhere he had not fully decided to go yet. He redirected. I am asking what you need, not what I need. What you need. Zuri looked at him. The restaurant hummed quietly around them. Someone at a nearby table was having a birthday. She could hear the low, cheerful conversation, the completely ordinary music of people who were not sitting in the specific wreckage she was currently sitting in. She thought about what she needed. She needed a new attorney. She needed to know exactly what Donna Marsh had access to, which documents, which strategies, which parts of the case structure were potentially compromised. She needed to understand what Daniel Cho had actually delivered to Do-yun versus what he had potentially delivered elsewhere. She needed to move her prenatal care because the photograph outside the Bellevue medical office meant that location was burned. She needed to call Marcus and warn him. She needed to do all of this while being 7 months pregnant and having just discovered that the most carefully constructed protection she had ever built had a person inside it working against her. I need 48 hours, she said, and I need you to stay out of the way while I use them. Do-yun nodded, and then she said, I need you to tell me everything you know about Daniel Cho. Not the syndicate version. Everything. All right. And the papers, she said. I need you to sign the papers before the end of this week. Not as a favor. Because we are going to be co-parents through a legal process, and I cannot do that effectively while we are still legally married, and the entire structure of my case is potentially compromised, and I need at least one thing in this situation to be clean and resolved. Do-yun reached into his jacket. He produced a pen. He produced, from the same pocket, a folded set of papers. She recognized them, the same document she had placed on the table in the conference room 4 nights ago, slightly worn at the fold lines from being carried. He had brought the unsigned papers to this meeting. She looked at them. Then she looked at him. I brought them, he said, because I was going to sign them tonight regardless of how this conversation went. Whatever you decided to do with the information I gave you, whatever you felt about why I gave it to you, the papers were always going to get signed. He set them on the table, he uncapped the pen, and then in a small Korean restaurant in Capitol Hill, with the sound of someone else's birthday celebration at the next table and the rain against the windows and the baby, kicking twice in quick succession, as though she too was waiting for something to resolve, Seo Do-yun signed his name on the line that ended their marriage. He capped the pen. He slid the papers across to her. Zuri picked them up. She held them in both hands. She looked at his signature at the bottom of the page, the familiar aggressive slash of it, the signature of a man who had always written his name like a statement. She thought she would feel something clean. She did not feel something clean. She felt the specific, complicated exhaustion of a person who has won a thing they needed to win and discovered the winner did not resolve all the other things that were still in motion around it, the compromised attorney, the surveillance, the manufactured evidence, Daniel Cho, and whatever machinery he had put into motion that had not yet fully revealed its shape. She had come into this fight with a fortress. The fortress had a traitor inside it, and the signed papers in her hands, the thing she had walked into the Baekjin headquarters 4 nights ago to obtain, the centerpiece of the plan she had spent 6 months building, they were real, and they were hers. And they changed her legal situation in ways that mattered. But they did not change the fact that somewhere in the city, a man named Daniel Cho was still moving, still calculating, still possessed of information about her that she had not intended to give him, and that the next move in whatever game he had been playing had not yet been made. She put the papers in her bag. She stood up. 48 hours, she said. 48 hours, Do-yun agreed. She walked toward the door. She pushed it open. The cold Seattle air hit her like a wall, and she stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, and she breathed 1 breath, 2, 3, the specific, deliberate breathing of someone making their body do the thing it knows how to do while their mind catches up. Then her phone buzzed, a text, unknown number, different from the one Kwan had called from. She looked at the screen, 4 words. She knows you're here. Zuri stood on the sidewalk in the rain and read those 4 words twice and understood with the cold, airless certainty of a person watching a trap close that the 48 hours she had asked for had just become considerably shorter, and that whatever Daniel Cho's endgame was, it was not waiting for her to be ready. She knows you're here. 4 words. Unknown number. Rain on her face, and the restaurant door still warm at her back, and the signed divorce papers in her bag, and 7 months of careful architecture, suddenly feeling like it was built on sand. Zuri looked up from the phone. The street was ordinary. Late afternoon, The Capitol Hill sidewalks carrying the usual mix of people moving through their lives without crisis. A woman with a stroller, two men in rain jackets talking outside a bar, a delivery driver double parked with hazards blinking. Nobody looking at her, nobody who appeared to be watching her. That meant nothing. She had learned in 7 months of operating carefully on the edges of a world built on surveillance and leverage, that the people who were watching you were almost never the ones you could see. She went back inside. Do-yun was still at the table. He looked up when she pushed through the door, read her face in approximately half a second, and stood. She held out the phone. He looked at the screen. His expression did not change in any dramatic way. It sharpened the particular sharpening of a man whose operational mind has just received a relevant data point and is already integrating it. When, he said, 30 seconds ago, outside, he turned the phone over, looked at the number, took out his own phone, and sent a text she could not read. 20 seconds later, his phone produced a response. He read it. Burner, he said, untraceable in the time we have. She, Zuri said, not he, not they. Do-yun looked at her. Daniel Cho is not working alone, she said. I knew that already. The operation was too organized for one person. The surveillance, the fabricated documents, the referral to Donna Marsh, that's a structure. That takes coordination. And whoever sent that text just told me there's a woman involved who knows I'm at this location right now, which means someone has been watching me since before I walked into this restaurant. Do-yun put money on the table without counting it. We need to move, he said. I need to move, Zuri said. This is my problem. Zuri, do not. Her voice was flat and hard, and she meant every syllable of it. Do not do the thing where you stand up and take over. I have been managing this without you for 7 months, and the fact that it's become complicated does not mean the solution is you stepping in front of it. He looked at her. His jaw was tight. She could see the specific cost of what she was asking for a man who controlled things as a survival mechanism, as a fundamental operating principle. Being asked to step back from a threat was approximately equivalent to being asked to stop breathing. Then tell me what you need, he said. I need to call Marcus. Now, before I move, use this. He produced a second phone smaller, the prepaid kind, the kind he apparently carried, as a matter of course the way some people carried breath mints. She took it without comment and dialed Marcus's number from memory. He answered on the second ring. Where are you right now? She said immediately. Pause. Zuri? Don't say it. Are you home? I'm at yeah. Yes. Stay there. Do not open the door for anyone you didn't specifically invite. Do not answer calls from numbers you don't know, and do not tell anyone where I am because I don't know where I'm going yet. I'll explain everything later. Zuri, what? I'm okay. The baby's okay. I'll call you from this number when I'm somewhere safe. She ended the call. She looked at Do-yun. Donna Marsh. She said, is she actually involved or is she a clean referral that Daniel used to get a foot in the door? I don't know yet. I need to know. I know you do. Because if she's clean, then I have a real attorney who has my actual case files, and I can reach her and warn her. And if she's not clean, then everything I've given her in 4 months needs to be treated as compromised, and I need to know exactly what that means for the divorce filing. Do-yun reached out and took the burner phone from her hand. She almost stopped him. She let him make the call, watching his face while he spoke Korean in short, clipped sentences, the operational language, stripped of everything not directly useful. Call lasted less than 2 minutes. He handed the phone back. Marsh is clean, he said. The referral chain goes. Daniel Cho referred you to Marsh, but Marsh has no connection to Cho beyond that introduction and no awareness of what he was doing. Her phone is not answering because she is in a deposition that started at noon and will continue until evening. Zuri exhaled. One piece that was not broken. Okay, she said. Okay, then the case is intact, the filing is intact. The documentation is intact, Do-yun confirmed. What Cho had access to was your movements and your personal communication, not your legal strategy. How do you know what he had access to? Because I spent 2 days going through everything he reported to me and comparing it against what he would have needed to know versus what he actually knew. The legal specifics were not in his file. Your location history was. Your daily patterns, the medical office, the apartment building, my address, she said. Do-yun's expression told her before he spoke. Yes, he said. The cold moved through her from the inside out. She thought about the apartment. She thought about the door with the deadbolt she engaged every night before she went to bed, the neighbor on the third floor who sometimes left packages in the hall, the parking structure with the gate that sometimes stuck. She thought about the specific unremarkable safeness of the place she had chosen because it was off the syndicate's radar, because no one connected to Do-yun knew she was there, because she had been careful. I can't go back there tonight, she said. No, Do-yun agreed. I'm not going to your building. I wasn't going to suggest it. Then, I have a property, he said, not connected to the syndicate. Private, clean, purchased under a name Cho doesn't have. Choi knows it, Kwon knows it, nobody else. She looked at him. The calculation she was running was not simple. It involved every lesson of the last 7 months pressing up against the specific reality of the next 12 hours, the reality of being 7 months pregnant with a compromised address and an unknown woman somewhere in the city who knew exactly where she had been 30 minutes ago. It involved the signed divorce papers in her bag, which were real and which mattered, and which did not, in this moment, resolve the immediate problem of where she was going to sleep tonight. One night she said, "Yes, I need full access to communication. No one monitors my calls or my messages, understood. And I need Donna Marsh's number so I can reach her the moment that deposition ends. Kwon has it. He was already texting. I'm sending it to the burner now." She pulled on her coat. She buttoned it with the methodical focus of someone who needs to do something with her hands while her mind works through architecture. The restaurant around them continued its ordinary function plates, moving conversation, the small, unremarkable music of people eating dinner on a Wednesday. None of them knew. That was the thing that got her. Sometimes the complete invisibility of a crisis from the outside. She was a 7 months pregnant woman buttoning her coat in a Capitol Hill restaurant, and to every other person in this room she was simply that. Not a woman whose protection structure had just revealed a critical compromise. Not a woman who could not go home tonight. Not a woman standing at the exact point where every plan she had made met the reality of what she hadn't been able to plan for. She picked up her bag. "Let's go," she said. The property was a townhouse in Eastlake, narrow and unremarkable from the outside, with a door that required 2 separate key codes and windows that, she noted when they arrived, had been fitted with the kind of reinforced glass that did not advertise itself. Do-yun did not come inside. He delivered her to the door, handed her a key fob and a phone charger, told her Kwon would be reachable at any hour, and left without being asked to. She locked both locks. She stood in the entryway of the townhouse with her bag on the floor, and her coat still on, and the baby pressing steadily against her lower ribs, and she allowed herself, for exactly 90 seconds, to feel the full weight of what had happened in the last 6 hours. Then she stopped. She took off her coat. She found the kitchen. She drank a full glass of water standing at the counter. She sat at the small table with the burner phone and a notepad she found in a drawer, and she began writing down everything she needed to do, in order, with the specific focus of someone who has learned that the only reliable antidote to fear is a list. New attorney contacts secondary if Marsh compromised. Not compromised, reach Marsh tonight. Apartment do not return until situation with Cho is resolved. Marcus warned. Prenatal new location, new appointment, schedule within 72 hours. The text she knows you're here, who is she? Daniel Cho's network, what is the full shape of it? The fabricated documents, what was their intended destination? That last item. She had been moving so fast through the immediate logistics that she had not fully stopped to examine the question of where those documents were supposed to go. Do-yun had received them. Do-yun had spent 2 days verifying them and determined they were false. But Daniel Cho could not have known that Do-yun would verify before acting. The documents had been constructed to produce a specific response: outrage, suspicion, the aggressive mobilization of the syndicate's legal and operational apparatus against Zuri. What if Do-yun had not verified? What if he had simply acted on what he was given? The answer was that she would be sitting in a very different situation right now. The custody process would have been poisoned at the source. The divorce filing might have been tangled in contested paternity claims. Her attorney, believing she was representing a straightforward domestic case, would have been facing a syndicate legal team armed with manufactured evidence and deploying it without mercy. Cho had not been trying to help Do-yun. He had been trying to trigger Do-yun into a response that would destroy Zuri. Why? She sat with that question for a long time. Donna Marsh called at 8:47. Zuri answered before the first ring finished. "I got your message," Donna said. Her voice was different from its usual register clipped. The deposition rhythm not yet fully shed, but underneath it something more alert. "Talk to me." Zuri talked. She went through everything: Dan Jelcho, the referral chain, the surveillance photographs, the fabricated documents, the text message on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. She talked for 11 minutes without stopping except to breathe. When she finished, the line was quiet for 4 seconds. "All right," Donna said. Her voice was fully operational now, the deposition cadence gone. "First thing, your case is intact. He had no access to my files, my strategy notes, or any of the documentation you provided me. The attorney-client privilege protected everything the moment you retained me." "The referral," Zuri said. "He sent me to you. and I have had zero contact with Daniel Cho since that referral, which I can document. He introduced us and then disappeared from the picture entirely, which I did not find unusual at the time. People do that, a pause. Second thing, the fabricated documents. I need copies, I have them. Send them to my secure email by morning. Third thing, where are you right now? Somewhere safe. Not my apartment. Good. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I need you in my office, and I need you to bring every piece of original documentation you have. We are going to go through the full case and identify every single point of potential exposure. Another pause. And I am going to need to understand the nature of your relationship with Seo Do-yun at this exact moment. Because if he has signed those papers, he signed them tonight. Donna was quiet. She night, at dinner, before the text. Zuri, Donna's voice shifted, not softer exactly, but more careful. I need you to understand that signed papers in your possession are not yet filed papers. The filing process, I know, I'll bring them tomorrow. What I need to know tonight is whether there is any mechanism by which Cho, or whoever he's working with, could use the compromised documentation to interfere with the process before we can file. They don't have access to your legal strategy. They have my address. They know my attorney's name. The referral is public information. They have 7 months of my movements, Donna thought. They could attempt to establish a competing legal narrative. File first, get something into the record that complicates your position before we can respond. But they would need standing to do that, and standing requires, she stopped. Who is standing in this situation besides you and Do-yun? Nobody, Zuri said. Then Cho has no legal mechanism to interfere directly. He was working through Do-yun. If Do-yun is not cooperating with that approach, he's not, then Cho's legal leverage is gone. What remains is operational. The woman, Zuri said. The text said she knows you're here. Female, someone who could locate me at a specific restaurant at a specific time. That's either electronic surveillance or physical surveillance, or both. That's outside my area, Donna said carefully. I know, Zuri said. I'm working on it. She ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table. She picked up the burner phone and dialed Kwon Ji-suk's number, which Do-yun had sent her along with Donna's. He answered immediately. I need to know everything your office has compiled about Daniel Cho's associates, she said. Specifically any women with operational roles in whatever he was running. Kwon's voice was professionally neutral. Ms. That information is? I'm not asking as Do-yun's wife, she said. I'm asking as the person Cho was targeting, who has a right to understand the threat she is facing. And I'm asking because Do-yun told me 48 hours and I'm using mine. All of them, a pause. I'll need to reach Mr. Seo, Kwon said. Reach him, she said. She waited 7 minutes. The baby moved. She put her hand on her stomach and breathed. Kwon called back. There is one name, he said. A woman named Jeon. No surname that we have confirmed. She ran logistics for Cho Communication, location, the coordination of the surveillance operation. She is the one who would have been managing the physical watch on your movements. Age description. Late 20s, small. She operated out of a co-working space in South Lake Union under the cover of a data consulting firm. Operated, past tense, a brief pause. As of this evening, the space has been vacated. She was warned. Someone warned her. The cold again. The inside-out cold, who, Zuri said, who warned her. We do not know yet. Is she a threat to me, physically? We don't believe her role was operational in that sense. She gathered information. She did not, Kwon stopped. Chose his words. Her function was intelligence, not action. Cho's function? Another pause. Longer Mr. Cho's situation is being addressed, Kwon said. As of 2 hours ago, he is no longer in a position to direct anyone. Zuri did not ask what that meant. She understood what it meant. In the way you understand things when you have spent 2.5 years adjacent to an organization that settled problems with finality. The woman, she said, Jeon. If she was warned, she is either running or she has been redirected to a new function. The text was sent after I left the restaurant, Zuri said. Which means someone saw me leave. Which means either the restaurant was being watched or I was being followed before I arrived. Or both, Kwon said. I need to know if I am being watched right now. This address. I have someone 2 blocks out, Kwon said. Mr. Seo arranged it when he brought you there. Zuri absorbed this. He arranged it before I asked, she said yes. She wanted to be angry about that. She reached for the anger and found it was not where she usually kept it, that the specific version of anger she deployed against Do-yun, taking control without permission, was getting in the way of the simpler reality, which was that there was a person 2 blocks away, whose function was to notice if someone was watching her building, and tonight, specifically, that mattered more than her feelings about how it had been arranged. Tell him to stay, she said. Yes, Ms. Ellington. She ended the call. She went to the window and looked out at the East Lake street below wet pavement. The orange smear of streetlights in the rain, parked cars, nothing moving. She stood at the window for 3 minutes without stepping close enough to be visible from outside. Then she stepped back. She went to the bedroom. She did not undress. She lay down on top of the covers with her phone on the nightstand and the burner beside it, and her bag on the floor within reach. She did not sleep. At 2:14 in the morning, the burner phone buzzed. Do-yun, she answered. Jian, he said. His voice had the specific quality it got at 2 in the morning when something had broken open. We found her. Zuri sat up, where she walked into a police precinct in Belltown 40 minutes ago. She is talking. The room rearranged itself. Talking, Zuri said. Police. Yes. About Cho, about the operation. About the fabricated documents. A pause. And about the original purpose of the operation, which was not. Do-yun stopped. She heard him breathe. Which was not simply to discredit you in a custody dispute. Zuri's hand tightened on the phone. Tell me, she said. Cho was not working for me, Do-yun said. I knew that. What I did not know was who he was working for. Jian has told investigators the name of the person who funded the operation and directed its objectives. Another pause. Kind that carries weight. The goal was never custody. Fabricated documents were designed to do two things simultaneously. First, destroy your legal standing in the divorce. Second, give whoever holds those documents leverage over me. Over the syndicate, not personal leverage, operational leverage. The full shape of it arrived, not a custody dispute. Never a custody dispute. Zuri was the pressure point, not the target. Do-yun was the target, and her pregnancy, her departure, the raw exposed nerve of his failure as a husband and a man had been identified by someone who understood Do-yun's psychology as the most efficient instrument for getting inside his defenses. Who? She said. Do-yun said a name. She did not recognize it. His name means nothing to you, Do-yun said. It shouldn't. He runs an organization in Vancouver that has been positioned against the Baekjin syndicate for 2 years. He identified Cho as a vulnerability, a man who was loyal to me until he was offered something he wanted more. He identified you as the mechanism that would make me irrational. He was right about Cho. He was wrong about me. He was almost right about you, Zuri said. Silence. Yes, Do-yun said. He was almost right. Zuri thought about the 2 days Do-yun had spent verifying the documents. She thought about how close it had been, how easily a man with less discipline, or more rage, or simply less time, might have received those documents and moved immediately. The entire operation had depended on Do-yun not stopping to verify. On his anger at Zuri, at the situation, at the loss of control the pregnancy represented, being sufficient to override his operational instincts. It had almost been sufficient. Cho, she said. What happens to him now that Jian has gone to the police? He is in police custody as of 90 minutes ago, Do-yun said. Jian gave them enough for a warrant. He was at a property in Kirkland, a beat. He was not difficult to locate. She did not ask whether the police had found him first. The fabricated documents, she said. If Jian is cooperating, those get entered into a law enforcement record, which means they become part of a public legal process, which means the custody proceeding is protected, Do-yun said, because the documents are demonstrably fabricated. Demonstrably, with Jian cooperating, there will be a record of how they were made and for what purpose. They cannot be used against you in any legal proceeding. Provenance is documented. She exhaled. It was a long exhale, kind that takes something with it. You need to sleep, Do-yun said. I know. The person outside is staying. I know. I told Kwan to tell him. A pause. Something in the quality of it was different, not operational, not the focused exchange of tactical information. Something else. Zuri. His voice was quiet. The late-night version of it, the version that existed when there were no rooms full of attorneys and lieutenants, no performance of authority required. Don't, she said. I'm not going to say anything you have to respond to, he said. I just started again. She's okay, the baby. Zuri put her hand on her stomach. She's been kicking since 10, she said. She's fine. Good, he said. He ended the call. She lay back on the bed. She stared at the ceiling of the Eastlake townhouse and thought about Daniel Cho sitting in a police interrogation room in the early hours of a Thursday morning, and Jian, who had walked into a precinct on her own terms and chosen, for whatever reasons Jian had, to take the exit that did not involve being managed by anyone else, and the man in Vancouver, whose name she did not know, who had looked at the architecture of her marriage and seen, correctly, where it was weakest and built a weapon out of that weakness. She thought about how close it had come. She thought about how the thing that had saved her, in the end, was not the protection structure she had built, which had been compromised before she'd finished building it. It was not the divorce papers, or the legal filing, or the documentation folder, or any of the careful and exhausting work of the past 7 months. It was Do-yun, Seo Do-yun, who had received manufactured evidence designed to make him erupt and had instead spent 2 days verifying it, and had then called her, not his attorneys, not his lieutenants, and put the envelope on a table in a neutral restaurant and said, "Here is the thing you needed to know." She did not know what to do with that. She was 30 years old and 7 months pregnant, and the legal dissolution of her marriage was signed and sitting in her bag, and the most immediate threat to her safety had been dismantled by the man she was divorcing, and she did not know what to do with any of that except lie on a bed in a safe house in Eastlake and breathe and let the baby kick and wait for morning. At some point she slept. She did not know when. She woke at 6:43 to the sound of her phone, the real phone, not the burner ringing with Donna Marsh's number on the screen. She answered. "You need to come in," Donna said. Her voice was controlled but moving fast, the particular register of an attorney who has been awake since before dawn processing new information. "Now, not 9 o'clock now." Zuri sat up. "What happened?" Jian's cooperation with police last night produced a search warrant that was executed at 3 in the morning at Daniel Cho's Kirkland property. Among the materials seized were, Donna paused, and in the pause, Zuri heard something she had not heard from this woman before. A fractional uncertainty. A breath that went slightly longer than the sentence structure required. Among the materials were documents that include your full legal strategy. Case notes, deposition preparation materials, argument outlines. Zuri's feet hit the floor. "You said he didn't have access." "He didn't have access through me," Donna said. "What they found at the property indicates a secondary source. Someone who had access not to my files, but to yours." "Ms. Ellington," another pause. "Is there anyone who had access to your personal copies of the case materials? Anyone at all, regardless of how much you trust them?" Zuri stood in the middle of the bedroom of the Eastlake townhouse at 6:43 in the morning and ran through every person who had been inside her apartment in 7 months, and arrived at one name that she had not until this moment considered, because Marcus Webb had driven her to an appointment. Marcus had sat in her kitchen in February and listened to her explain the structure of the divorce case, because she had needed, that night, to explain it to someone who was not an attorney, someone who would listen as a human being rather than a professional. Marcus Webb, who had access to her apartment, because she had given him a key 3 months ago, because she was pregnant and alone and occasionally needed someone to bring her groceries when the nausea was bad. Marcus Webb, who had answered her call the previous evening on the second ring. Marcus Webb, who had said yes when she asked if he was home. "Donna," she said, "the secondary source. Do the materials at the property indicate when the documents were obtained?" "The forensic team is still processing," Donna said. "But based on the file creation dates, yes. Approximately 8 weeks ago." 8 weeks ago, Marcus had had a key. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Zuri said. She ended the call. She stood in the quiet of the Eastlake bedroom and thought about Marcus's voice on the phone the previous evening, the ease of it, the complete absence of any register of guilt or awareness, and she thought, maybe she was wrong. Maybe the case materials had been obtained some other way, through some vector she hadn't identified, and Marcus was exactly what he had always appeared to be, which was a friend who showed up when she needed him and asked for nothing in return. She thought about how much she wanted that to be true. She picked up her bag. She put on her coat. She called the number of the person watching the building from 2 blocks away and told him she was coming out and needed a car. The Eastlake door opened to a morning that was gray and cold and fully arrived. The rain from the night before having given way to the flat, pressing overcast of a Seattle morning that had decided not to commit to either clearing or continuing. She stood on the step for a moment, with the bag over her shoulder, and the signed divorce papers inside it, and 7 months of everything she had built, and everything that had been built against her, settling around her like the weather. Car was waiting. She walked toward it, and she had her hand on the door handle when her real phone rang again. Not Donna, not Do-yun, not Kwan, and she looked at the screen and saw Marcus Webb's name on it, and the morning stopped for a full second. Everything paused. The car and the driver and the flat gray sky all suspended while she looked at the name of a person she had trusted completely and understood, with the specific and devastating clarity of someone who has been here before, that she was about to find out which version of the truth she was living in. She answered. She answered on the third ring, not the first. Not immediately, the way you answer when there is nothing to consider. She stood with her hand on the car door and the flat gray morning pressing down on everything, and she let it ring twice while she made a decision about what kind of woman she was going to be. In the next 5 minutes, the kind who was afraid of the answer, or the kind who needed it regardless. Third ring, she answered, Zuri, Marcus's voice familiar. The specific warmth of it that she had known for 3 years, that she had trusted, that she had called at 7 in the morning when she was shaking and needed someone to say, I'm coming, without conditions. Marcus, she said, I've been trying to reach you since last night. The number you called from, I know, I couldn't call back from it. Are you okay? You scared me. You said stay home and don't open the door, and then nothing for 12 hours. She listened to his voice. She listened to it the way you listen to something, when you are trying to hear what is underneath it, not the words, not even the tone, but the specific quality of breath and pacing that a person cannot fully control, that exists below the level of performance. She heard warmth. She heard worry. She heard the slightly elevated pace of someone who had spent a sleepless night waiting for a call that did not come. She did not hear guilt, but she had not heard guilt in Daniel Cho either. The 3 times she had spoken to him on the phone, and he had been inside her life like a splinter for months before she knew he was there. I'm okay, she said. The baby's okay. What happened last night? What was... I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to understand that I am asking because I have to, not because... She stopped. Chose, not because I want to. A pause on his end. Brief. Okay, did anyone ever ask you about my case? About the divorce? About the legal strategy? Anyone at all, in any context, who seemed interested in what I was doing or how the case was structured? The silence that followed was 4 seconds long. 4 seconds, which is a long time on a phone when you are waiting to understand whether someone you trust is the person you believed them to be. There was a man, Marcus said. The morning did not move. Car was still there. The driver was still there. The gray sky was still doing what gray skies do in Seattle in the late weeks of the year. None of it moved. Who, she said, he contacted me in February. Said he was a documentary filmmaker. Said he was doing a piece on domestic situations involving, he used the phrase, high-profile individuals. He asked us about you. I didn't tell him anything, Zuri. I want you to know that before I say the rest of it. A breath. But I didn't tell you, he asked. And I should have. I knew I should have at the time, and I told myself it was nothing, and that I was protecting you from worrying about something that was nothing. And that was another breath rougher. That was me making a decision that wasn't mine to make. She leaned against the car, not dramatically, just the slight adjustment of a body that needs something solid behind it for a moment. February, she said, early February, maybe the 6th. 7th, 8 weeks ago, was approximately the 6th of February. He had not given information. He had been approached, and he had declined, and he had not told her, which was a failure of a different kind from what she had feared, and not a lesser failure, but a different one, a human one. The kind that comes from a person making a judgment call about what someone else can handle and getting it wrong. She had done that herself. She had done that with her own silence, with Do-yun for 7 months. What did he look like? She said. Marcus described him. It was not Daniel Cho. The description matched nothing in the architecture of what she knew not Cho. Not anyone Cho had described. Not anyone in the documentation Do-yun had shown her. Which meant it was someone from the outer ring. Someone functioning as a collection mechanism without necessarily knowing the full picture of what was being built. I need you to write down everything you remember about that conversation, she said. The exact date, the location, what he looked like, everything he said, and everything you said. Send it to this number. She gave him the burner and Marcus. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry, I should have told you. Yes, she said, you should have. She did not add anything to that. He deserved the clean weight of it without cushioning, and she was tired enough and honest enough to let it land the way it was supposed to land. She got in the car. Donna's office in Bellevue had the specific quality of a place where difficult things got handled with precision, no decorative softness, no art designed to soothe, just clean lines and organized shelving, and a desk that communicated we work here. Donna was already at that desk when Zuri arrived at 7:22, cups of coffee on the surface between them, a printed document that Zuri recognized as the police report summary from the overnight warrant execution. Zuri sat down and handed over the signed divorce papers first. Donna looked at them, at the signature, back at Zuri. "Tonight," she said, "last night." At dinner, Donna set them carefully to one side. "I'll file this morning." Ahead of anything else, she tapped the document in front of her. "Now the materials found at Cho's property. I've had 2 hours to go through what law enforcement shared with me this morning, and the picture is more specific than I indicated on the phone." She folded her hands on the desk. "Cho had partial access to your case strategy. Not through me, not through any breach of my office. He had copies of 3 documents that could only have come from your personal files: the preliminary case outline you drafted before you retained me, a notes document you created summarizing your objectives, and a financial statement you prepared to document your independent accounts." Zuri thought about her laptop, her apartment, the key she had given Marcus, and the question of whether anyone had entered that apartment in the past 8 weeks without her knowledge. "The documents were not particularly damaging on their own," Donna continued. "They gave him a structural understanding of your approach. What he did with that understanding was construct a narrative, the fabricated evidence designed to run directly against your strengths. He knew you had documented the marriage. He knew you had financial protections in place. So he tried to undermine the credibility of both by manufacturing evidence that questioned your fidelity and your financial honesty simultaneously." She looked at Zuri steadily. It was a sophisticated operation. It required understanding the specific shape of your case well enough to build a countermeasure. "But it failed," Zuri said. "It failed," Donna confirmed, "because Do-yun verified rather than acted." Which, she paused, "is something I would not have predicted as the probable outcome, based on what you've told me about him." "Neither would I," Zuri said. "A year ago." Donna looked at her. "Let that sit," did not pursue it. "Jian's cooperation is producing additional names," Donna said. "Law enforcement in both Seattle and Vancouver is moving on this. Cho will be charged. The Vancouver connection is a federal matter now. It is essentially being handled by people with substantially more resources than either of us." She picked up her coffee. "What this means for you specifically, the divorce filing is protected. The custody framework we discussed proceeds without the contamination Cho intended. The fabricated documents are formally documented as fabricated, with a chain of custody that leads directly to Cho and the Vancouver organization. If any of this comes up in a custody proceeding, and it may, because this is now part of a public record, it strengthens your position rather than threatening it." Zuri sat with that for a moment. She had spent 7 months building protection. She had built it carefully, with discipline, with the specific, exhausting focus of someone who knows they cannot afford a mistake. And parts of it had been compromised. Parts of it had been infiltrated and used against her, and had come within one man's decision to verify, rather than act of destroying everything she had constructed. And she was sitting here at 7:30 in the morning, and the divorce was being filed today, and the custody framework was intact. And the people who had built a weapon out of her pregnancies and her marriage were in police custody in a property in Kirkland. Not clean, not smooth, not the controlled execution of a perfect plan, but standing. "What do I need to do today?" she said. "Nothing," Donna said. "I handle the filing. You go somewhere that is not your apartment, because I want you to give law enforcement 2 more days to fully process the situation before you return to a location Cho had access to. You rest, you eat." She looked at Zuri's face, which presumably communicated something about the quality of the previous night's sleep. "You let your body do what it is supposed to be doing right now." Zuri looked at the desk. "The apartment," she said. "Key. Marcus had access. Someone may have entered without. Law enforcement will sweep it as part of the warrant execution follow-up," Donna said. "I've already requested it. You'll have a clean report before you return." Zuri nodded. She picked up the coffee. It was good coffee, the kind that someone had made with actual attention. She drank half of it. "Donna," she said, "when this is over, when the filing is confirmed and the custody framework is in place, and all of this is," she gestured with the cup, an imprecise gesture that contained everything, "done. What does my life actually look like?" Donna studied her. not with the professional assessment she had been deploying since Zuri sat down, with something more personal, the look of a woman who has been doing this work for 25 years and has sat across this desk from a number of women who ask this question at the end of the thing they had survived. It looks like yours, Donna said. That's what it looks like. She did not go back to the Eastlake townhouse. She called Do-yun from the burner at 9:15, standing outside Donna's building with a second coffee from the lobby, and the pale attempt at morning light doing its best through the overcast. The filing is going through today, she said. I know. Juan confirmed. The apartment needs 2 days before I can go back. Townhouse is available, he said, as long as you need it. Days, she said, 2 days. A pause that had a specific quality, not comfortable, not uncomfortable, but inhabited. Pause of two people who have been through something together that neither of them fully has language for yet. Jian's testimony is covering the Vancouver connection, he said. My organization is cooperating with law enforcement on the elements that can be addressed without broader exposure. Juan is managing the interface. Is that going to create problems for you? The cooperation. Some, he said, less than the alternative. She thought about what the alternative had nearly been Do-yun, receiving fabricated evidence and acting on it, the syndicate's legal apparatus turning against her. Custodies the battle fought in the shadow of manufactured doubt, while the Vancouver organization used the chaos as cover to move against the Baekjin syndicate's operations. Someone in Vancouver had understood exactly how to use a marriage falling apart as the opening move in an operational play, and they had almost been right. The man in Vancouver, she said, the one who funded it. Being addressed, Do-yun said she did not ask how. She had made a decision, a long time ago, about which parts of Seo Do-yun's world she was willing to know about in detail, and she held to that decision now because it was the right one, regardless of everything else. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She went back to Eastlake. The 2 days were quiet in a way she had not experienced in months. Not peaceful peace was a thing that required a settled feeling, and the settled feeling had not arrived yet, was probably still somewhere in transit behind the events of the past week. But quiet, the specific quiet of aftermath, of a storm that has passed and left the air changed behind it. She called Marcus on the second morning. He answered immediately. I sent everything to the burner number, he said. The description, the date, the conversation. I know. Donna has it, law enforcement has it. A silence, Zuri, he said. I have been sitting here for 2 days trying to figure out what to say to you. You don't have to. I do, he said, because I made a choice that was about me. I told myself it was about protecting you, and it was actually about me not wanting to add to your weight. And that's not how friendship works. That's not what you needed from me. She sat by the window of the Eastlake townhouse with the phone against her ear, and the lake visible below the buildings across the street, and the morning doing something tentative with light. No, she said, it's not, I know. But you're also the person who drove me to that appointment, she said, and said I'm coming at 7 in the morning when I was scared. And I don't know how to hold both of those things at once yet. I'm still working on it. That's fair, he said quietly. Give me some time, she said. As much as you need, he said. She believed him. That was the complicated part. She believed him, the way she had always believed him, because the core of him was what she had understood it to be, even if the February decision had been wrong. People were not consistent. They were not entirely one thing. She knew this better than most. She had married a man who was simultaneously the person who made her feel protected and the person who dismantled her autonomy without noticing he was doing it. She had built a protection structure with a friend who simultaneously showed up without condition and made a judgment call that left a hole in her wall. She herself had left a man without telling him she was pregnant, which was the right decision given the circumstances, and also a decision that had cost them both something neither of them would fully account. Nothing about any of it was clean. She was beginning to understand that clean was not the goal. She went home on the third morning. The apartment had been swept, confirmed, returned to its ordinary shape. She stood in the doorway for a moment when she first opened it, reading the space, the way you read a space after it has been examined by people who were looking for what was wrong with it. Everything appeared to be as she had left it. The same furniture, the same stack of books on the low table by the window, The same baby things in various stages of organization that she had been slowly accumulating in the corner of the second bedroom, where the crib was being assembled piece by piece on the weekends when she had energy for it. She set her bag down. She stood in her kitchen and made tea and drank it standing up, looking out the window at the street below, at the ordinary morning movement of her neighborhood. Her phone rang. Donna. "The filing has been accepted and processed," Donna said. "The divorce is officially in the legal record as of this morning. The process runs its full statutory period from here, but the filing is confirmed and Do-yun's signature is on record. There is nothing that can interrupt the timeline now." Zuri put her hand flat on the kitchen counter. "Thank you," she said. "The custody framework discussion begins when you're ready," Donna said. "There is no rush. You have time to breathe." She ended the call. She finished her tea. She went to the second bedroom and looked at the partial crib in the corner. 3 sides assembled. The 4th still in its packaging, the instruction sheet unfolded on the floor beside it. She sat on the floor next to the pieces and looked at them for a while. Then she picked up the instruction sheet and found where she had left off and began working. It took her an hour. When she was done, she stood up slowly, the specific, careful rising of a woman in her 3rd trimester who has just spent an hour on the floor, and she looked at the completed crib and felt something she could not immediately name, which was not happiness exactly, but was adjacent to it, the specific satisfaction of a thing built with her own hands that would hold something she loved. She took a photograph of it. She did not send it to anyone. She went back to the kitchen and started thinking about lunch. 3 weeks later, Do-yun called. Not Kwon, not a message relayed through the syndicate's outer apparatus. Do-yun himself, at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday, calling her cell phone with the blunt directness that was, she had come to understand, actually one of his more honest qualities. "I'd like to meet," he said. "Not about the case, not about attorneys." She was quiet for a moment. "About what?" she said. "About what comes after the case." She thought about it. "Next Tuesday," she said. "The same restaurant," right, he said. He was there when she arrived. Same corner booth. No visible security, same as before. He stood when she approached. Same as before. She sat across from him and noted that he looked different from the man in the conference room 4 weeks ago, or perhaps not different, perhaps only more visible. The way things look different when you are no longer looking at them through the specific distortion of crisis. He looked tired. Not the exhausted past performance, tired of the overnight operations she had witnessed in the marriage, but a different kind, the tired of a man who has been thinking hard about something for 3 weeks and has not arrived at easy answers. "How are you?" he said. 7.5 months, she said. "Everything hurts, and I sleep 4 hours at a time, and I finished assembling the crib last week." Something crossed his face. She let it cross, did not name it. "The syndicate situation," he said. "The Vancouver matter. It's been resolved. I'm not going to ask how, I know. I'm telling you because it means the operational threat to you is closed. Anyone who was watching you through that channel no longer has a reason or a mechanism to continue." She nodded. "And the custody framework," he said. Donna's office reached out to Kwon. "I've reviewed the initial proposal, and it's fair," he said. Simply, without the qualifier she had been braced for. The however. "Fair, and I intend to agree to it." She looked at him. "The restriction on syndicate contact," he said. "The provision that Amari," he stopped. "The name." He had used the name, which she had not given him, and which he had therefore obtained from somewhere, perhaps from Kwon, who communicated with Donna's office, perhaps from some other path through the administrative layer that connected everything. He had used it carefully, like something that mattered to him to get right. That Amari has no exposure to the organization's operations. "I understand why it's there. I'm not going to contest it." Zuri studied him. "You've been thinking about this for 3 weeks," she said. "Yes, and you arrived at fair." "I arrived at what she needs," he said, "which is not the same thing as what I want, but it's the right answer." She let the silence hold for a moment. She thought about the night in the conference room, which felt like a different decade, even though it had been less than a month. She thought about him sitting in the ordinary chair instead of the power chair. She thought about the pen that hadn't moved. She thought about him spending 2 days verifying documents when the easier and more characteristic response would have been to act on them immediately. And she understood, sitting in the same restaurant where he had slid signed divorce papers across a table, that those 2 days had not been only about operational caution. He had known what was at stake. He had made a choice about who he was going to be in the situation. "Tell me something," she said. "All right, the night I came back." Conference room. "Your men were outside the door. You could have," she chose the words precisely, "you could have managed the situation the way you manage situations." He said, "Why didn't you?" He looked at the table. The specific look of a man who has had 3 weeks to think about an answer, and is not certain the answer is adequate but has no better one. "Because you weren't afraid of me," he said. "And the last time you hadn't been afraid of me, the very first time, when you walked into that dinner function and you looked at me like I was an interesting non-problem rather than someone to navigate, that was." He stopped. "That was the moment I understood that I wanted you in my life. And I spent 2.5 years making sure you'd never look at me that way again." She sat with that. It was not an apology. She did not need an apology. Apologies were language, and language was something this man handled with the same precision he handled everything. And she had learned not to trust precision as a substitute for the actual thing underneath it. What he had just said was not precise. It was ragged and unfinished, and had cost him something to say in the particular way that true things cost something. She believed it. "The child is mine," she said. "It is not a question. It is a fact. She is mine, and I am building her life according to what I believe is right for her. Not according to what is convenient for you or for your organization or for anyone else." "I know," he said, "but she is also yours," she said. "Biologically, and in whatever way you choose to make it true, in the ways that matter more than biology. That is available to you. It is not guaranteed. It is not automatic. It is a thing you will earn over time through behavior, through the specific work of showing up in ways that do not cost her anything. And it will be slow, and it will be unglamorous, and there will be no conference rooms and no authority and no men flanking you to establish the terms." She watched him absorb this. "I understand," he said. "I don't think you do yet," she said, "but I think you're capable of it." "That's different." He looked at her. The specific look he had given her in the conference room, when she had opened the coat, not the controlled assessment, the other look, the one that existed below the management layer. "That's more than I expected," he said. "I know," she said. She picked up her water glass and drank from it. "The anniversary of my father's death is in March," he said, out of nowhere, and she recognized this for what it was: not a strategic disclosure, not information being deployed for effect, but the thing that happens when a person is trying to be real with someone and reaches for a real thing. "He was the reason I built the organization the way I did. He believed a man was only what he controlled. I believed him for 35 years. She listened. "I'm not sure I know how to be a different kind of man than the one I built myself into," he said. "But I know the kind of man I want her to see when she looks at me. And those two things are not the same man yet." "No," Zuri said. "They're not. I'm working on the distance between them." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's all I was ever asking for," she said. "Not perfection, not the transformation, just the honest work on the distance." He nodded once. Slowly, she finished her water. She set the glass down and put her hand briefly on the table, and then picked it up, and she thought about how this moment would look from outside two people at a corner table in a quiet restaurant, unremarkable. Just a woman in her third trimester, and a man in a gray jacket, having a conversation over water, and whatever this was, this thing that was not reconciliation, and not war, and not anything she had a word for yet. She stood. He stood. She looked at him across the table. "Tuesday after next," she said. "Donna's office. 9 o'clock. Bring Quan and whatever documentation your side needs for the custody framework discussion." "We'll be there," he said. She pulled on her coat. She walked toward the door. This time he did not call her name. She stepped out onto the Capitol Hill sidewalk into a morning that was doing something new, not fully clear, not the flat Seattle overcast of the past weeks, but something in between. The particular quality of light that arrives when the weather has not yet committed to being one thing or another, and the day is still in the process of deciding what it will become. She walked to her car. Zuri Ellington was born on a Friday in late March at 6:41 in the morning in a hospital in Seattle that Zuri had chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with anyone except herself and her daughter. She weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had her mother's mouth and her father's eyes, and a set of lungs that announced her presence with considerable force, which the attending nurse noted approvingly as an excellent sign. Zuri held her first. She held her for a long time, in the quiet of the room after the controlled chaos of the delivery had settled into aftermath. And she looked at this person, this specific and complete and utterly new person who had existed in theory for 9 months and was now existing, in fact, with actual weight and actual warmth and an actual grip on Zuri's finger that was stronger than anything that small should reasonably be. And she did not feel anything simple. She felt everything at once. The fear was there. She had expected the fear. She had not expected the other thing alongside it, the specific, enormous, slightly terrifying clarity of understanding that she would do anything for this child. The calculation of what she was willing to endure and what she was willing to fight for had permanently reorganized itself around this 7 pounds and 4 ounces of new person. Marcus was in the waiting room. He came in an hour after the birth, when Zuri had eaten something and the initial medical activity had resolved, and he stood in the doorway of the room and looked at Amari in a way that made Zuri believe, again, in the version of him she had always believed in. He started. "I know," Zuri said. He sat in the chair beside the bed, and they did not talk very much for the next hour, which was the right amount of talking. Do-yun came that afternoon. Zuri had called him herself from the hospital at 8 in the morning when it was done. The call had lasted 40 seconds, she told him. He said nothing for 3 of those seconds. Then he said, "I'll come this afternoon if that's all right." And she said, "That's all right," and they ended the call. He came alone. He stood at the threshold of the room in the same careful way Marcus had stood, the specific tentativeness of a person who understands that they are entering something that does not belong to them, where their presence is a privilege rather than a right. She indicated the chair. He sat. She adjusted Amari and held her out slightly, not passing her over but presenting her, and Do-yun looked at his daughter for the first time, with an expression that she would not describe to anyone, that she would keep as one of the things she simply knew and did not translate into language, because some things lose their truth in the translation. "She's healthy," Zuri said. "Yes," he said. His voice was not steady. He was not performing unsteadiness. It was simply not steady. "You can hold her," Zuri said. "If you want." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She placed Amari in his arms with the careful instruction that new parents give to anyone holding a newborn for the first time: support the head. "That's it. She's fine." And Do-yun held his daughter with the focused, slightly terrified attention of a man who has 15 years being certain about everything and has just been handed something that certainty has absolutely nothing to do with. Amari made a small sound. Do-yun went completely still, as if movement might somehow undo what was in his arms. Then she settled. He exhaled. Zuri watched him hold their daughter, and she felt the specific, complicated weight of the situation, all of it. The conference room and the restaurant and the East Lake townhouse and the 2 days he had spent verifying rather than acting, and the chair he had chosen and the name he had used, and the Tuesday after next at Donna's office, and the slow, unglamorous work of the distance between the man he was and the man he wanted to be when she looked at him. She did not love him. That was the truth, or the current truth, that whatever she had felt in the beginning, the thing that had made her believe that protection was the same as safety, and that certainty was the same as steadiness, had not survived what the marriage had done to it. She did not love him. She was not sure she ever would again. She was not building toward it, was not waiting for it, was not holding space for it to return. But she was sitting in a hospital room watching him hold their daughter, and she was not afraid, and she was not performing anything. And the woman who had walked into the Baekjin headquarters 4 weeks ago in the rain with divorce papers and a 7-month secret beneath her coat was still the woman sitting here, more tired, considerably less comfortable physically, but still her. Still entirely, specifically, unreservedly herself. That was what she had gone to get 7 months ago when she left. Not the divorce, though the divorce mattered. Not the legal protections, though they mattered too. Not even, primarily, the child, though the child was everything. What she had gone to get, when she walked out of that house, with a single bag on a rainy morning, was the simple and profound thing of being herself again. in a life that she had designed according to what she actually needed, rather than according to what someone else had decided she was. She had gotten it, not cleanly, not without cost. Not without the specific indignity of discovering that her protection had a hole in it, and that people she trusted were operating in the gap, and that the world did not reward carefulness with safety in any reliable or guaranteed way. But she had gotten it. Amari made another small sound. Do-yun looked up from his daughter to her mother. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him. "For letting me be here," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, "Take care of the distance, Do-yun." He understood what she meant. He looked back at Amari. "I will," he said. The afternoon light came through the hospital window and lay across the floor between them, not warm exactly, not the golden light of uncomplicated endings, but real light, actual light, the plain and sufficient light of a day that was continuing to exist, which was its own kind of answer to every question a person could ask about whether it was worth it. Zuri leaned back against the pillow. She closed her eyes for a moment. She listened to the sounds of the floor outside the intercom, the soft movement of people doing their work, the ordinary machinery of a place designed to receive the beginning of lives and tend to them. She thought about nothing in particular. She breathed. And Amari, 7 pounds 4 ounces, daughter of Zuri Ellington, who had walked into a building in the rain to leave and had left, and continued to leave every day in the ways that mattered. Amari made one more small sound in her father's careful arms, and settled, and was quiet, and the room held all of them for a moment in the plain and ordinary grace of an ending that had cost exactly what it cost, and had given back something that could not be measured.